This week on Corinne's Pick, we have part 3 of an interview with Don Perlis. Welcome back. Today we have Don Perlis, a remarkable artist that does large images that depict some of the social, political, some of the environments, the critical things that happen in New York City. He's a painter that is reminiscent of Renaissance paintings in Europe. Welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
We were talking a little bit about, we've talked a lot. This is the third episode in which we've been exploring your paintings. I think we talked about Bernard Goetz issues, the Howard Beach. We talked about the Me Too movement,
Yeah.
a Times Square series. I think we're still talking about, right now we're talking about your subway paintings.
Yes.
So, so we'll get to the next painting, which I think is a painting of Eleanor Bumpurs.
Yes.
And hopefully you can give us a little bit of background.
Sure. Sure. Well, that's the windmill painting. It's not.
Okay. Let's go with the windmill.
Yeah. Yeah.
This
This is my return to the subways, in a sense, because this is a fairly late painting. It's about 6 years old, 5 or 6 years old, and it's a breakdancer on 14th Street. There's an area on the 14th Street Union Square station where they're performers, and they've lately put garbage cans there to prevent them to do it. But and at this time they were still. So I put a bunch of musicians behind them and supporting them, a bunch of other dancers behind them, and people coming and going to work. It's pretty straightforward, kind of a slice of life kind of painting. There's a Hispanic girl in the back, like, making that gesture, and there's a white businessman with an attaché case, and I guess the next minute he'd be asking, they'd be putting the barrel out, So
this was the beginnings of hip hop.
yes,
The rap and hip hop
Yeah.
in New York City.
yeah. Well, if it's 6 years ago, it wasn't the beginning, right? It's been
Oh, okay.
yeah. It's during, I guess, it's hip hop.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the next image.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Now, this painting was also, I think it was the first of all the paintings of the new series of subway pictures that I did. And I had seen an actual gospel group on the trains, guys who, I forget there's a word for that, but I think buskers or buskers, I mean, when they sing for money. There's a kind of there's an English word for it. I forget what it is, but and there's also another group of guys that I saw who do rock and roll, and they harmonize and they get on, and one of them is a tenor and the other's a bass, and a lot of people are doing this to make money, and when I was a young man, one of my favorite gospel groups, because I love gospel music, and one of my favorite groups were the Mighty Clouds of Joy. And I used to listen to their music every Sunday morning. I had records. I put records on, and I just loved the passion. And when I saw a gospel group on the subway, they weren't anywhere near as good as those guys. But I named them the Mighty Clouds of Joy, just for myself. And then a really great young collector named Joel Schultz came and bought this painting.
Oh.
He's got it as part of the collection. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And it's one of my favorite. It's one of my favorite images. Actually, I did not have it in my show, ironically, because I worked so hard on that painting that I got exhausted from looking at it. I think, and then I had it in the studio, and then I turned it around about a year later, and it didn't. It looked not only as good as anything I had showed, but it looked even better. So I was delighted when Joel wanted to have it for his collection.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
There are times where being on the train is so uncomfortable, and some of these performances really do,
Oh, they're great.
you know, they
Yeah.
just lighten up
Yeah.
the trip.
Yeah, no, they're great. And, they're illegal because nobody's got a sense of humor or something. But, no, it's part of New York, really, and, they're back with de Blasio and increasing. So,
Okay, the next image, please.
yeah. Oh, now this was, part of the images that I made when I made the Howard Beach Central Park 5, Bernard Getz, that whole series. And this was Eleanor Bumpers, who was a little old grandmother in the Bronx who was mentally ill, and they came to collect the rent, the housing police, and she really was not in her right mind, and she really got very threatened when they came in. Probably thought they were going to kill her, which they wound up doing. She took a butcher knife, raised it, and they, instead of backing down and going in the hallway, saying, "All right, there's a disturbed old lady, and let's calm her down," and they bloody shot her. And it was one of the most disturbing of and it was one of the most incendiary things that happened, but of all the racial incidents, because it was a really innocent old lady who was not, and it just did not have to happen. It did not have to happen.
I
And,
think it might have been a case for social workers to intervene with her rent situation instead of the police first.
There's so many ways to deal with people who were even not in their right minds, and even kids, and even there's so many ways, instead of just taking out firearms and blasting away at people, it's incredible. I mean, I don't know if they do that in England, but they have a history of not doing it, and I certainly don't think they do that there like they do it here. And there's certainly as many things going on all over the world where people get upset and they're not shooting them. So I don't know what the hell is going on, and it's still going on, and it's one of the most upsetting things about this whole area of discourse. So.
But your paintings really document many of the big cases that have come through New York City. The Howard Beach, Eleanor Bumpers,
Yeah.
Central Park 5,
Yeah.
Bernard Getz. These were historical markers in terms of race relations,
Yes.
in the city.
Yeah.
So, when you see that Eleanor Bumpers painting, it's not just a painting.
They're significant for people, the instances, how they resolved, and in the paintings about them. The subject is significant and deserves to get treated significantly. And in the past, artists did that. They did that. That's what they did. It was one of the functions of art.
How did you stage that painting?
Well, I made it up out of my head, all of them. I mean, but basically, it was my imagination.
But you hired a model.
Talking about the bumpers, or
Right.
Oh well, I had a wonderful model.
And you had her holding a.
Yeah, I had what I would do is I tie a rope to her wrist and then tie the wrist to a sprinkler pipe, and then so she could hold the knife in the air. Otherwise she can't stand there. So and then I have to put the energy into it.
She was a middle-aged black woman.
She was, yes. She was a model where I was teaching.
Okay.
At FIT, I was teaching at the time. She was a model. She was perfect for it, and so I hired her for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
How many years did you teach at FIT?
I don't even want to tell you. A long time, maybe 39 years, I think.
Okay.
Actually, yeah.
Okay.
And then Pratt for another 5 years previous
okay.
to that. And then I taught all over the place. I lectured at a lot of universities, taught all over the place. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the next one, please.
Oh yeah, this is something you'd see. You're starting to see it again. When Giuliani became mayor, he pushed these people I don't know what he did with them, pushed them into the corner, swept them under the rug, and now you're seeing them again. But I was actually going to my studio this morning, and there was a guy, actually it was a white guy, and he was sleeping out completely stretched out on a subway seat with a blanket underneath him, a blanket above him, with a scooter his hand was on, and his phone was underneath this thing. I mean, it looked like he had been there for about a month, but he was sleeping on the L train going this morning. You're seeing this everywhere again. And in these days, in those days, I mean, it was really a shock because this guy had all his belongings in a shopping cart, and the subway system takes away those benches because they don't want people sleeping on them. But it actually humanely gave a place for somebody who had no home to spend the night. People do it in Los Angeles on the beaches, so here they do it in the subway, you know. But and this was also an FIT model, actually, a guy who was posing in FIT, and that was my grandfather's overcoat. I had this overcoat that he had given me that I'd worn and worn until it was wearing out, and then I finally gave it away or threw it away, and I used it for this painting.
Do you paint? Are you painting that painting? Because that's part of New York City, and you're trying to, document that, or are you painting that more for social change? Is it about you wanting it?
It was more my experience, and it was what I saw every day. It was what I saw. I'd go to my studio, I'd see people sleeping in the street, and I'd see people on the train. It was part of the landscape. It was part of the environment. It is now, again, it's part of the environment. It's Monet went out and he saw trees and grass. We see homeless people.
Right.
It's part of our environment. It's part of everybody's experience, you know. It's part of being alive in New York in 2019 now, and it was in those days it was part of being in New York and living in 1985. Yeah.
Well, and how do you see the experience of art as a means of social, I guess, a social mirror? Like, do you think that artists have a responsibility to comment on what's going on in society?
Well, I think they could ignore it, which is what a lot of artists choose to do, or you can face it, like some artists do, not very many. And there are a lot of different ways to approach it. I mean, I don't know. And it's not even to be moralistic about it. I think 19th century France, where these wonderful artists painted all these people having a good time, nightclubs and drink. There was an underbelly of that those artists didn't focus on. But then 30 years later, when Picasso was in Paris, he was painting poor people, beggars, people that had no food, gypsy families, and he focused again on it. It comes and goes. And artists look at the world, and when it seems, it seems to be so predominant now. The way the gay 90s, having a good time, was so predominant. That was more important than the underbelly, having a good time. Now what's going on is so, our whole society is so conflicted, and there's so much stress. It seems to be a major component of all our psyches. It's something that it's going to wind most painting or most art, it's going to wind, if an artist is honest, it's going to wind its way in there, even if they're abstract, because it's part of the spiritual environment. It's part of the metaphysical environment that we're in, right? I mean, it's not something, it's almost tangible, even if it's not.
Okay, so we're going to go to break now, and when we come back, we'll look at some more. Well, I think we finished all your artwork, but we could go a little bit deeper in terms of your process and
Sure.
and some upcoming projects or.
Sure.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
my handle, and here is my spout.
When I get all steamed up, then I shout.
Tip me over and pour me out. Oh. It only takes a moment to make a moment. Cheers. Take time to be a dad today.
I see you mobbing over her. Let's go. Let's mob. Let's crawl. Let's crawl. Let's crawl. Hey yo, we mobbing. Come on, girl. Let's crawl. Hey yo, let's crawl. Hey yo, let's crawl. Hey, let's crawl. Hey yo, let's crawl.
We're back with Don Perlis. When we left off, we were talking about your paintings and your process. I think I was told we have one more slide. We have a slide called Lovers.
Yeah,
Okay, let's look at that one.
sure. This is one of the earliest paintings that I've got, actually. Yes, it is. Actually, I think it is the earliest one that you've got here. It's if you notice, there's the two World Trade Centers are in the background, and this painting was painted near where Chambers Street and West Broadway, and two people in love walking down into the train, into the underground, right, and soon right after this, those two towers didn't exist. So it's kind of poignant to look at it.
And it's also love versus something very dark and tragic in the background.
Yeah, and something something that's going to happen, something that's in the future. And when you look at it now, they actually were lovers. There was a model I worked with named Elaine, and I think she had a boyfriend at the time was Dennis. I remember them, actually. Elaine now lives in the Midwest, but I haven't seen her for years, but I worked with her for a long time. She's a wonderful model.
And you had no idea that at one time that the towers would not be there.
Nobody knew. I mean, those things were enormous. Actually, I love them because they look like the pyramids from Chambers Street. I mean, they were enormous things, and they just dominated the. I think when you got closer to them, they weren't so attractive. But if you saw them from far away, they had a certain. And also, they gave New York a certain image, which actually shockingly abruptly ended, like as soon as they were down. But man, now you look back, it's like another world, another time frame. Especially that little painting of mine.
So we've gone through all your images. If people want to see your work, they need to just go to Bibro.
Denise Bibro.
Denise Bibro.
Yeah.
Gallery, or you can go to, what is your website?
DonPerlis.com. DonPerlis.com.
Right. I want to talk a little bit about what you're doing in the present and what the current series you're working on.
Yeah.
What is the current series you're working on?
Well, I did a series of paintings based on the Me Too painting, and then it's morphing into something else now, which I'll talk about. But I made 3 very large paintings, which I haven't exhibited at all, but they're paintings of angry women beating up men, but they're light. They're not. My tongue is in my cheek, so to speak, or I should say, because the men are all superheroes, the women are all Times Square women, painted women. So the whole and the setting is all parts of New York. One of the paintings is in Battery Park City. Another one is even in New Jersey, another setting looking back toward Hudson Towers. And then there's a third one, I believe, that's in Times Square. But they're a kind of a parody of all the tension going on between the sexes, because I think they're something called the human comedy, And for all the seriousness of people being more really deadly serious about a lot of what's going on now, there's a light side to it also, because it's a human drama that we've all had to deal with since we've been kids, and our ancestors have all had to deal with it, and their ancestors had to deal with it, and it goes back, like we were talking about before, since the beginning of time. So it's almost a mythological subject, this kind of war between the sexes. And without getting into the politics of it, I wanted to make, and the fact that it's so much in the consciousness of the time that we live in right now, I wanted to bring it all to the fore. So I made these three very monumental images of it. And after it, I was kind of looking around for a subject, and because I'm kind of tired, you know, painting these major things, and I started doing something that I'd been playing with for years, which is to do paintings of a more general theme, and the theme that I'm thinking of is the 7 deadly sins, which is a biblical thing. And I was even thinking about yesterday, which was the Gay Pride Parade. Pride was once considered a sin, actually, and they flipped it around, made it a virtue. So it becomes something to think about. Is it a sin? Is it a virtue? When is it a sin? When is it a virtue? Why is it a sin when it's a sin? And the same thing with lust. Which is the first deadly sin that I'm doing, which is the most fun. And I've already done some in the Times Square series, so it made me want to expand it. So I started doing this painting of lust, and then I started thinking, wouldn't it be interesting to put every image of lust that I could bring up, in other words, make the lust painting of all lust paintings. So I'm thinking of putting the Marquis de Sade next to Harvey Weinstein, next to Donald Trump, you know, next to Kevin Spacey, next to, you know, in other words, next to Charlie Rose, next to, but also, without being flippant about it, I do have an image that I'm working up right now that I'm very excited about. That you know, I hope will be a major statement, it, you know. But one of the reasons I'm doing it is to further my art. I mean, I'm trying to give myself problems of construction. This is strictly formal stuff, really, and does nothing to do with subject matter. But I'm trying to give myself painting problems where I can increase my vision, you know, and so you search around for subjects that will enable you to do that, and then hopefully the subject will be relevant to other people, and so.
I think I saw that one of the paintings. I think, okay, I just want to reiterate. You're combining some themes of Me Too movement and the seven deadly sins.
First I did 3 large paintings of the Me Too movement. And then, because they, you know, if you start painting images of semi-clad women and dressed guys, there's an element of lust. It kind of brings it up mentally.
Because you're including a lot of figures who've been put down from the Me Too moment in that 7 deadly sins. Like you said, you want to use Charlie Rose, Weinstein, in the 7 deadly sins.
Yeah, well,
painting.
then lust becomes a sin, right? So lust becomes a sin. So these things touch on each other. I haven't really thought about, except, I mean, I haven't thought deeply about it the way you do if you had to write a book. But by instinct, these things tie up instinctively. I mean, if you put a man and a woman together, it brings up people's feelings, you know. So it brings up questions of what could happen, you know. So it's not my job really to kind of analyze all this stuff. And my job is to come up with images that are compelling and meaningful. And whether I do or not is not even up to me. It's up to people to look.
Right.
You know.
Right.
I don't have the power or the choice to to say that that's so. So,
Well, you certainly did not miss a controversy. You went from the Central Park Five
Yeah.
to the Me Too movement
yeah.
to
Well.
Bernhard Goetz. You have not missed a New York issue.
Well, the thing is, if I paint realistically, it's a lot more interesting than doing a still life. Not that I don't love still lives, and I still do them. Or a landscape, or portrait, where you do an individual. I do all the time those kinds of paintings. But there's other things you can do too that are very interesting. That representational painting, painting, you need a certain set of skills to be able to do, and I love developing the skills, and I love working on. And I would like my work in the end to have some meaning, in the sense that I would be able to put back something into art that's gone out of it. So, I mean, for me personally and professionally, my ambition is such that I would like to put back into painting something important enough that's been absent from it, and that doesn't have to be. That could actually increase people's enjoyment of not only looking at paintings, but enjoying the whole experience of looking at art.
Well, we've
Yeah.
run out of time. I want to thank you very much for being in the show. People can look at the credits and see how to get in touch with you.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me, Corinne. I appreciate it.
Okay.
I really enjoyed it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.